Hi everyone, so my name's Jamie, and for those of you who don't recognise me, I am a student doing A-levels in geography, chemistry and business, but what I'm going to focus on mostly on this channel will be geography, and with this it's going to be focused on exam tips, hints, and I'll probably do some revision videos for topics as well. Now what I'm going to do today for my first video is going to be basically my guide to writing 20-mark essay questions in the geography papers for AQA, because as you should know, these are the key questions you'll get asked and they make up the majority of your A-level papers. So I've got a presentation I can show you, and these are the key tips and what you need to write when you formulate your essay, as these will get you top marks every time using this structure. So here we are, this is what I've developed, and let's have a go. So why are the 20-mark questions important? Well, each paper, as you should know if you've been doing A-level for about a year, that each paper is worth 120 marks. And in each paper, there are 3 20-mark questions. That totals up to 60 marks for half your paper. That is half of your A-level, essentially, really, for the 2 papers, if you discount the NEA. But don't, because that's very important. And then for sections 1 and 2, the paper, they are out of 36. So 20-mark questions is worth more than the first half, the 2 sections where you have your 4-marker, your 2 6-markers. So that really does add up. So that's why it's important to get this structure right. So where in the paper do you get the 20 marks? You'll get them at the end of each of your sections, as you'll know, and you will get them in each of the topics that you do. So you'll have them in the compulsory topic of water and carbon cycles, in your optional topic of either coastal systems, deserts, or glacial landscapes. For my videos, we're going to always focus on coastal systems because that is the one that I did, unless I find something in deserts and glacial systems that I understand. But then you'll also have them in your optional topic of either hazards or ecosystems under stress. Now, this is often, again, I will be using hazards because this is the one that I studied, although it applies the same if you're doing ecosystems. Then for your human paper, your paper 2, you've got global systems and governance, changing places, and then the optional topic of either contemporary urban environments, population, or resources. And for mine, we'll be focusing on temporary urban, as that is the one I studied at A-level. So for your structure and time, we'll start with the basics. When you write your essay, it is 3 main things. Your brief introduction, so you need to define a key term in the question or state the case study or studies you'll be using, because that's important, because unless they state it in the question, you need a range of different examples. So when I did coastal systems, we learned about the Maldives, we learned about the Holderness coastline, we learned about Odisha in India. You need to have variation in your essay unless the question says only one. That's important. Then once you develop it, you need 2 or 3 main body paragraphs. This is the meat of your essay where you discuss the main points that you need to know. And then you have a final paragraph conclusion where you just discuss overall what you've had and then what you think, but you won't be saying I think, but we'll delve into that later on. Approximately, you need to spend 20 to 25 minutes on each 20-mark question, because as I said, this is the main part of your A-level where it's half the paper, unless you've got extra time, which is a bit longer, which is about 33 minutes, I believe. Right, so here I've just copied and pasted this from the mark scheme from AQA. This is the marking criteria to which they assess you. And what we'll want is, hopefully you can see my cursor, if I just move me out of the way, there we go, is that you can see is that we want to be in level 4, the 16 to 20 mark boundary, which is where my guide will get you, because this is what they want. You need detailed awareness of scale and temporal change, which I'll explain later, detailed relevant use of knowledge and understanding, key concepts, processes throughout your essay, for evidence of links, so synoptic links between the topics that you studied, so water and carbon, coasts, detailed analysis and application, which I will then again explain. I've got a slide for each of these, and then a conclusion, evaluative conclusion, so you're weighing up the benefits and overall, what have you come to because of this? Righty. So with this is my 6-mark criteria. These are the things that you need to include in your essay, and I'll have another video ready soon on how you use this. If your essay is not any of these 6 things I've listed here, no marks, they don't count. If they're not any of these, the examiner does not want to see them. And I'll explain each of them. So knowledge and understanding, concept and processes, temporal and spatial scale, assessment and analysis, evaluation, and your conclusion. And then I'll explain each of these. So the weighting of the assessment objectives, these are approximately equal. Some people debate it, but this is how I've been taught and it seems to be. how examiners are looking at it nowadays is they are approximately equal. Your AO1 is 10 marks and your AO2 is 10 marks, so equal balance. AO1 is basically your knowledge and AO2 is basically your use of the knowledge. So can you evaluate, can you assess your knowledge? Can you say what is happening because of the things that you have learned? Which is where I've got here in my tip. AO2, you will normally get less marks than your AO1 because it develops upon your AO1. If you don't have the knowledge to apply, analyse, evaluate, you can't get the AO2 marks. So really, it does start with the basics. So AO1, knowledge and understanding. This is the basics of the essay question. So in layman's terms, it means, do you know your stuff? Do you know what year the volcanic eruption was? Do you know where the Amazon rainforest is? Do you know how many gallons of oil there was in an oil spill? I know it sounds silly, but this is what they want. They want key facts, key terms, key knowledge from a case study or real world knowledge. So I can imagine coronavirus being used in a future case study somewhere. So that's what I mean, keeping up to date, keeping up to knowledge, that will get you some marks. This will often come from the chosen question, e.g. for water and carbon cycle, you actually are required 2 key case studies. You need one of a rainforest, so we studied the Amazon at my school, so that's the one I'll be using, or a sustainable management of water or flooding. So we used Clanberis and Clanroos, so that'll be another one that I've used. So that means you don't know your case studies, you've nearly lost loads of marks because you don't know your facts. People want to know these when you're reading your essays. So I've got here an example of what I mean when I say knowledge and understanding. So I've taken this from an example from paper 1, section A, water and carbon cycles, where I'm going to be using the Amazon tropical rainforest as my example for knowledge and understanding. So the key question I've been given here from my paper is, assess the extent at which the water cycle is influenced by humans in a tropical rainforest you have studied. So you have to use the one that you've studied, and it only asks for one. Like I've said, you can't go picking the Indonesian rainforest and the Amazon. You pick one, otherwise you will lose marks or you won't be counted for those marks because it only asks for the one that you've mentioned. So here we are. So the Amazon rainforest is the largest rainforest in the world, where an area the size of Wales is lost every year due to deforestation. The area is heavily vulnerable to human influence due to 65% of deforestation being due to cattle grazing. This can disturb the natural water cycle by reducing the level of interception. What's meant to say of? I'll have to edit that later. So as you can see here, what I've written, if it's highlighted in yellow, that's what I've meant by knowledge and understanding. So largest rainforest in the world, that's key facts. Area the size of Wales is lost every year, key fact, and that's also linking into spatial, which we'll discuss later on in the video. 65% being lost due to cattle grazing. These are key facts that'll impress your examiner because they're like, yes, this person knows it, they're not making it up. And don't go making up your answers because they do check them. That is, I do know they do check them. We've got people who have had that before. So then we move on to the second AO1, which is your concepts and processes. Now I've taken this from the mark scheme and I've quoted it. So the examiners want full and accurate knowledge and understanding of key concepts and processes throughout your essay. I want to stress that again, it's throughout. So don't think if you just put it your intro or in one paragraph, that means you access level 4. No, I want to see it throughout your essay because that is stated in the mark scheme. Otherwise you won't get access level 4. So concepts and processes are the basis of your essay in geography. Case studies are invaluable, but you can't actually learn a case study until you've figured out what the basis of that topic is. So here you need to include key terms like the topic you've learned throughout your course, and we've got an example here. There we are. So when I talk about key concepts and processes, I've given you one example from each of the topics that I have studied. So an example from the water cycle would be interception. You can think of it as infiltration, lag time, through flow, those processes. I know it sounds basic, that's what they want. It's not as hard as it seems, it's just all they're asking for. Carbon, combustion, respiration, decomposition. If you're a biologist, if you're a chemist, these should be rolling off your tongue because you just know these already. Coasts, 3 is for weathering, so that actually links to glaciation because you know it. Coasts, that has theirs. Hazard, that's Anui Ardente. I can't pronounce those perfectly, but that's what it is. Global systems, FDI, foreign direct investment and remittances, so the flow of labour, flow of capital throughout the world. Topophilia, your love of a place, how that could change over time. And then for my urban environments, rural to urban migration. So when you're doing a case study, you've got to think about what it is. So when you do it for urban, for example, I haven't written this down, I probably should have. but we'll have it there. So for rural to urban migration, we could go in Dharavi, the slum, about 1,000 new residents enter a day in Mumbai due to rural to urban migration. So there I've just developed on what I've just discussed. So my AO1 of my case study and facts, Dharavi, the slum, Mumbai. Then I've brought in rural to urban migration, the second part of my essay. So you can slowly see how it starts to form. So I've got an example for it. Yes, there we go. So knowledge and understanding. This time I've taken it from coastal systems and landscapes. So the question here is assess the extent to which freeze-thaw weathering is the dominant process at the coastline. So now you should be thinking of all your different processes: marine erosion, weathering and mass movement, physical weathering, biological weathering, chemical weathering, and thinking about all of them and using what you've learned in your lessons to assess this. So here I've got freeze-thaw weathering is when the water seeps into cracks and joints within the geological strata and freezes at night or below sub-zero temperatures. This causes a 10% increase in size and causes rock to shatter. However, so we're getting balance in there at the same time, cavitation also causes erosion through the pressure being exerted on the rock over destructive waves that have built up the energy over a large fetch, e.g. across the North Sea. So let's have a look at it. The bits I've highlighted in yellow are explaining my key concepts, my key terms. So geographical strata, freeze-thaw weathering, cracks and joints, cavitation, destructive waves, large fetch. These are general terms, but it shows that I've studied my topic well. I know what the fetch is clearly because I've given an example with the North Sea, that there's a long fetch between areas of maybe Holland and the northern regions, maybe near Middlesbrough, for example, because we had that storm surge back in the 90s, I believe that's when it was. So you are showing that basically you have that along your case study knowledge. And this one's probably my favourite. This is half of an AO1, AO2, because you're then bringing into different bits, but this combines both the assessment objectives. As geographers, exams want to test your knowledge to understand the world working at different spatial scales, e.g. so your local scale, so where you live, the national, the country, international. So when we're thinking about climate change, it's not a one country is responsible. You know, there's transboundary pollution, there is issues with comparing which countries are worse off. So developing countries struggle to deal with it while the rich may be causing more issues due to climate change. And that helps to formulate your argument. So as we move up the ladder, if you include each of these in your essay, it moves it up further. And then look back to AO1 because you need some facts about the spatial and temporal scale because you're assessing the level to which of it as well. So you could say in the short term, impacts weren't as bad, but in the long term they were. So one, you've assessed it, but then you've also got some AO1 from your knowledge about what happened. So you've got both the assessments in, if you understand what I mean by that. So for this one, I've taken it back again to the water and carbon cycle because I thought this was the most easiest to do it. So for the exam question, it was assess the extent at which climate change is becoming a more severe issue in today's world. So an example responses, so I've defined it by using spatial scale. So climate change is a change in the global or regional climate patterns. So I've given you international and regional. This has been argued to accelerate with the 80 parts per million of CO2 being released in the last 50 years. So 50 years, that's time, that's in the longish term, causing the level of CO2 to reach 400 parts per million in the atmosphere. So concept, because remember when you did the different spheres in water and carbon, the biosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, cryosphere, pedosphere if you did that one, or pedosphere, depends on who you are. If mitigation of climate change isn't taken, the argued tipping point to which the effects are irreversible is by 2030. So I've included temporal scale change again. The island or region of the Maldives, where only 200 of their 1,200 islands are inhabitable. So I've given you spatial scale once again, where due to the sea level rise, the Maldives could be wiped out by 2080, temporal. So I've included the last three things we've just discussed there. I've included my spatial scale, I've included facts, so 400 parts per million, 80 parts per million, and I've also given key concepts, so things like the atmosphere, sea level rise. Those are the things they want. That's the three bits I've already done. So we've not actually done that much, and we're already working our way up to level 4. So the assessment objectives in assessment objective 2. This is a bit different to AO1. This is where we've now fully moved into the next level. So these build upon AO1. AO1 is previously based on knowledge, facts, and arguably what I like to call rote learning. It's not much having to think. You just need to know your different facts, lots of flashcards, that kind of thing. AO2 focuses more on your ability to assess those factors you've learnt on within geography and base it off the question you're given. So this is where it really separates the A star, the A's, to the B's, to the C's, to the D's, because only the A star, A, B candidates are able to assess the factors they are given, whereas the people who only learn their AO1, that's just knowledge. Like I said, you've lost half your marks because you're not able to assess what you're thinking. But this looks more difficult than it actually is. This is what I mean. It's more learning your structure, and once you've got it, the 20-mark questions are actually sometimes easier than the 4 markers and the 6 markers, but I'll show you what I mean when I do that. So your AO2 is your assessment and your analysis of a question and understanding it. So this is basically bridging the gap between your knowledge, your AO1, and the ability to identify which factors of your knowledge are more important. So when you see the word assessment in a question or assess, I just change it to ranking. You've got to rank your conceptual theory. So when we think about urbanisation, push-pull factors, which ones are stronger? Is it natural increase? Is it rural to urban migration? Why? Why is it that? And then you have to bring in your evidence. That way you've ranked it. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, because it's debatable, but you need to be able to justify that. So if we have a look at what I wrote here, you link your analysis into the question. So it's assessment and analysis. So here we go. So in here, let's say I've debated that rural to urban migration is stronger than natural increase. So here we go. Leads to an increase in number of people in cities. That's my first bit. This often causes the population to become more dense. It's led to that, number 2. Due to a lack of available housing, slum developments often emerge, level 3. This is due to the lack of opportunities that were previously perceived by the bright lights of the city, level 4. An example of this is the Mokoko slum in Lagos, point 5. So now I've just made an analysis from 5 different points. So it's led urban migration to how we've led to a slum growth. That's just how you develop it. That's a bit of a basic one, but we've got an essay that I'm going to show you in the next video and how I mean by you're analysing and you're just developing your answer. Now, this is one of the main points, and this is one of the more difficult ones that people find, not because it's hard, just because they forget. So this is slightly different to assessment evaluation. Assessment ranks the factors. So climate change is more important than sustainability or things like that. So that's ranking it. Whereas evaluation, you look at both and you look at the positives and negatives. You've not actually made a decision. You're not ranking them. You're just looking at both of them, the positives and the negatives of this. So as I've written here, discusses the pros and cons of each of the factors. This part of AO2 is where you need to bring in your basics of geography, the things that you should know how to do at GCSE, where I call them SPE. Social, political, economic, and environmental factors. When writing your essay, you need to consider all of these. Not loads, you don't have to picture all of them equally, but it's better if you've brought at least one each time, each essay. So let's have a look at what I wrote from this. So here I've taken it from paper 2, Contemporary Urban Environment, section C, where the question has, to what extent has methods to reduce air pollution in urban environments been a success? So we're going to use the case study that I used when I was studying A-level, and that was in New Mexico. So key term and defining. Air pollution is the presence in or introduction into the air of a substance which has harmful or poisonous effects. So I've defined my questions. I've got my AO1, like we discussed, knowledge. One area that has shown methods to reduce is Mexico City through the process of Hoy no Circula. So there we go, I've got my case study in. So I've defined the concept and I've got my case study in, where cars are only allowed to drive 6 out of the 7 days per week. So temporal scale, because I've said 6 out of 7 days of the week. This has shown economic benefits due to the fact it's reduced commuter times, and social benefits of reducing air pollution by 20%, allowing for better mental health. So now I've just given my evaluation because it's got good positive benefits, but I've also then led on to my analysis and my assessment because it's led to better mental health. But however, so there's my debating again with my evaluation, environmental issues in the long term do suggest to have failed, as sometimes owners have bought 2 cars to bypass the 6 out of 7 day driving issues, causing a greater level of particulate matter to be emitted by combustion from fossil fuels, therefore showing some schemes have been ineffective. So already I've now just linked it to another topic in carbon, which is a synoptic link, which is going to be discussed later on in the presentation. But that is what I've shown you so far. So we've got knowledge and understanding from a case study, concepts and processes, combustion and air pollution, your scale with 6 out of 7 days of the week, economic and social benefits evaluation, and then analysis as how it led to social benefits for mental health. So we've already got the 5. Now this last one is the best bit, but I just want to show you the different bits I've included to show you. So I've given context from the case study, gave 1 positive impact. I then included a key fact, e.g. 20% for better mental health. Then counterbalanced it using a long-term environmentalist view that moves you up the AO2 level. So here we are, last bit, AO2. This is your conclusion, the final part of your essay. You summarise your main points made from your main body paragraph. It brings everything you've discussed into your ending and what you make a decision. But here's the bit, don't say I think. Never say I think. Put the evidence suggests that, as this is a more professional way to do it, and this limits bias in your essay because it seems more professional, more formal, and it doesn't seem like you've made a lapse in your judgment, whereas if you go with the evidence, there's already reasoning to back it up. Say which factor or case study you've used is the most or least important factor, depending on what the question is. So if it said for coasts, which erosion process is the most important, you'd maybe say freezefall weathering is the most because, and then you'd use your case study about how it's maybe eroded a lot of the coastline, or no, weathering and mass movement has because 10 metres is lost from the Holderness coastline every year due to rotational slumping. It doesn't matter, just justify it. And then at the end, you don't always have to do this. I do it because I prefer it. It may be good to make a suggestion with this. So yes, you've made your decision, but what is that in the long term or the short term impact's been made? But how do you think that will lead on into the future? So have we got, here we are. So for this one, I've taken it from paper 1, section C in natural hazards, where I discussed to what extent do primary impacts of volcanic hazards cause greater impacts than secondary impacts. So that's a bit wordy, I know, but that was the question they gave you. So basically, they were saying, are primary impacts or secondary impacts worse? And this is what they found when I made my conclusion. It's a bit long, but we'll just mostly just focus on the yellow and the highlighted bits. So overall, the evidence suggests, so like I said, the evidence, not I think, from the Montserrat eruption of 1997, the long-term impacts have caused a greater issue than the primary impacts, as the population has declined by more than 50% up to 2020 today. So I've then just included my temporal scale. This is due to the lack of available space in the area due to risk zoning being used, causing density to increase in the northern region of the island. So there we go, I've now just got some spatial scale, and I've made my overall balance because I've said the long term was worse because it's still occurring and it was greater than the secondary impacts, whereas the primary impacts showed to be beneficial due to the 30% increase in soil fertility in the long term, but the short term of that environmental impact was made it infertile, but that didn't last very long. So really you've got to consider, what does it matter? And moreover, it may be that the secondary impacts themselves could have been reduced. And moreover, maybe you're making a suggestion. I know I'm saying a lot here, but it helps to just watch it as you read it. I mean, it could have received funding from Britain to restore their economy, suggesting that the level of development also influences which effects are more devastational. Or devastational. That's what Google gave me. So basically, as you look here, I think I've written it. There we go. So an overall judgment have been made. Secondary is worse than primary. Key facts of data have been given previously. This is if I'd written the essay myself before. So I've given, 50% decline in population. I've given you dates, 1997, 30% increase in soil fertility. And then I've given another brief factor when I discuss economic development due to it being a British colony. So I've then added a synoptic link due to it being a lower developed country. It needs dependency, money and funding from Britain, and that links to synoptic links, which is what we're about to finish off with. Now, this is Jamie's final tip on synoptic links. I've just copied and pasted it from the mark scheme again. Examiners require full evidence of links between knowledge and understanding to the application of knowledge and understanding in different contexts. What does that mean? Basically, they want links between what you have studied. They want to know, can you link what you learned to water and carbon to the coastal system? Can you link what you learned to global governance to changing places? So by that I mean, so global governance, we've got loads of chain stores, development, international marketing, so things like Walmart, McDonald's. How does that impact your local changing place, the McDonald's being your local area? That's synoptic links, because you've changing places are things that you associate with the global scale, global governance. So here's a big thing, as you should know if you've done the questions, you will have a 9-mark question and they will tell you that you have to link to topics, so maybe changing place, global governance, like I've said, and you will have to do that yourself for the 20 marker, because they don't tell you, you have to be able to make a synoptic link. The more the better, because I think that helps to formulate your answer and access level 4, because like they've said, if you don't have synoptic links, you can't access level 4, you can't access AO2. Here's just a brief example of what I've said for synopticity. This is based off a link between climate change, carbon, and coastal systems and landscapes. So climate change causes severe issues at coastal landscapes. I've assessed, so I've said what I think is happening. Due to an increase in combustion of fossil fuels from cars and industry, this has led to 80 parts per million of CO2 being released into the atmosphere. So I've led to carbon. That has caused increased insolation into the atmosphere and warming of the oceans due to the albedo effect. So that's the one that you should know, which is the reflectiveness and the level of water versus ice, how much insulation is actually stored in water or ice due to the colour of the surface. This causes the water molecules to undergo thermal expansion due to increased kinetic energy from the sun's energy. So basically the sun's energy, the heat, has then been transferred to the water molecules, giving them increased kinetic energy. They expand if you do chemistry. That causes the volume to increase. It's not actually always the ice caps are melting and that adds more. It's actually greater effect is due to the expansion of the water molecules. This causes the volume of water to increase and sea levels to therefore rise. Coastal systems link. This can be seen with the Maldives, where sea level rises by 0.8 to 1.6 millimeters per year. So there you go. That's what I'm showing you. That's the last slide, and that is just my brief hint. So what they need is those 6 key things, which I'm just going to go back to if I can. I will become more developed in this as I use it, I promise. Here we are. So the 6 key criteria: your knowledge and understanding, your concepts and processes, your temporal and spatial scale, assessment and evaluations, conclusion, and then through that, you need to link the analysis in when you do your assessment and your ranking. But I'll show you how I've done that in an essay in the next video. Let's have a stop sharing, we'll just have a discussion. There we go. All right, everybody, thank you for watching the video if you managed to last that long. And this is basically my top tips for getting a 20-mark essay structure completed, what you need to write if you want to access level 4. I will see you for the next video, which will be an essay review. Thank you very much, and bye.